What's up, everybody? I'm Simon Sabro, and today we're going to be doing a little interview with White Manga. So, before we get into that, be sure to comment down. Have you read anything published by Saturday AM? Be sure to leave a like, subscribe, all that good stuff. Follow me on Instagram at Simon Sabro YT. White Manga, do you have anything you want to say before we, start the interview here?
Hey, just happy to be here. Thanks for having me. Can't wait to go and break down this interview. I am White Manga, the creator of Apple Black, writer and illustrator, co-founder of Saturday AM, and my own White Manga TV YouTube channel where you can learn to put together your own manga and more. A lot of fun stuff. And yeah, I can't wait to get into it.
Nice. All right. And I'll leave all of his links down in the description in case you want to go check those out. Definitely would recommend it. But with all that out the way, let's just jump right into it. Okay, so the first question that I want to ask you is if you had to pick what your biggest inspiration was, what would it be? Whether it be like another YouTuber, a mangaka, a comic book creator, anything like that whatsoever. Like, what's your biggest inspiration?
Um, I've had a lot of inspirations over the years, many.
Hmm.
Obviously, some inspired me more than others, but when this question comes about, I usually just refer to Bleach because it was one of the
Okay.
first manga I read, and it was one of the first ones that also made me think, you know, maybe I can make comics, maybe I can make manga.
Hmm.
Obviously, there were others along the way, some Western content, some YouTubers that made me put content out there to really see if I can build an audience, and
Hmm.
because it was difficult to break into the industry. But if quick answer, the biggest I would say, or the one I usually the go to, I would say is Bleach.
Very respectable answer. On that kind of note, do you have like a favorite character in Bleach?
That's also a tough one. I have like I don't know. I don't have
Okay.
having favorites. It's one of those. Sometimes it's very
Okay.
clear. Sometimes it's clear. Sometimes it's difficult. I like Gin. I like Kenpachi. And then sometimes maybe Ichigo, Grimjaw. Here, it's tough. But let's go with
Okay.
Gin. Let's go with Gin.
Again, respectable. Very respectable. Also on that note, when I was reading Apple Black, I believe it was in volume 4 that it like happened, or was it 3? I don't exactly remember, but there was like a couple of characters that when I saw their abilities, I was like, this is definitely like Bleach inspired. I'm not gonna say who because I really forgot which volume it was exactly, but
Yeah.
it was Simon. If you know, if you know. But
Okay. Okay.
yeah, as well as one of the I forgot exactly what you called it, but the guy with the hammer. I'm really bad at remembering character names. I'm so sorry. Um, and he's one
Roman.
of the yes.
Yeah.
He reminded me a lot of Kenpachi.
Oh, okay.
Um, but okay, yeah, I definitely saw a lot of like Bleach inspiration in Apple Black, and also, so I realized you started another series. I forgot the name of it. Um,
Started in the, I have a yeah I have another series called Bakassi.
Bakassi, that's what it is. Yes. I didn't get the chance to like actually read that one, but can you explain really quickly like what the synopsis of it is and what inspired you to do that one?
Bakassi is more. It's weird because it's not necessarily modern times, but
Hmm.
it's like modern times with a little twist, where demons and all kinds of creatures from different dimensions immigrate to the US, but it's not like an invasion type thing. They're just literally just immigrating because they can't,
Okay.
for different reasons, they can't be where they're at, or in some cases they can, but they're just traveling the same way people would travel from country to country.
Okay.
And so it's just a world of just a mixture of all these weird beings living normally and dealing with the same social, economical, all kinds of issues, racial, I guess, literally different races now. And But it's supposed to be this funny, weird series, and the character is supposed to be the Bakassi is like a gang that used to exist before,
Hmm.
and the gang was actually prejudiced towards these new creatures and stuff. And so the main character is like a former member from this band that doesn't exist anymore, and in a way whether he plans to or not, he's kind of reforming how the group views other people, and it's more accepting and progressive, whether he means to or not, because he's kind of a terrible person, but really a good person, but also a terrible person at the same
Okay.
time. It's kind of like Always Sunny, and the whole show would kind of be like if Gintama and then Always Sunny in Philadelphia had a baby.
Okay. It's a very interesting way to describe it. Okay.
Yeah.
On that kind of note of like your story creations, when you're making like your series, what's your thought process? Do you feel like you put more time into like the characters, the plot, or like the setting? Like what do you feel like a lot of your attention is put into?
I like to put my attention goes all around.
Mm.
I would say first, I usually find myself with the characters,
Okay.
but I guess but it depends. I think I go back and forth. Sometimes it's the world of building. Sometimes it's just the story. I don't even know how the
Mm.
character. I don't know how the characters look. So I'll say it's evenly split. There isn't one way I do it. I just whatever I start with is what I start with. Maybe that's the whatever I start with in that moment is the most interesting thing. But I guess I start with whatever is the most interesting thing to start with in the moment. And sometimes it's developing the world a little further for it to make sense, for what I'm planning to make sense, or developing the character, or developing the storyline first.
Okay.
And you just kind of mix and match until it works. Sometimes you develop a character and then you try make them fit, and then you find yourself removing the character altogether and then using an already existing character to do whatever you wanted to do. Sometimes it's a world building thing where developing that to make sure it works and fits, and having fun there, and because that's interesting and all kinds of stuff. There isn't one way,
Mm.
so there isn't one fixed way. I just stay flexible to make sure it works.
Okay. Makes sense. Okay. Now, in terms of like your art style, do you feel like you have a different inspiration for your art style, or would it still be Bleach?
I would say I have multiple influences.
Okay.
I think you can look at the art style and see some Bleach influence, but I think I've gotten all kinds of comments you can imagine, like, oh, I see some Bleach influence, I see some Naruto influence, I see some One Piece influence, I see some Gintama, I see some My Hero Academia, I see some
Mm.
all kinds of stuff. The funny thing is, a lot of the characters, a lot of
Mm.
it was already written in 2012, right? When I started making my YouTube videos and all of that.
Okay.
It was written in 2012. So there's like a lot of series that it's also been compared to that it's older than, if that makes
Yeah.
sense. It's just that the series came like officially traditionally published in stores and all of that last year, but the
Okay.
content itself has
It's
actually
been there.
been it's older than My Hero, it's older than some people say Sano looks like Eren, for instance. and
Okay.
and and my series, I don't think my series is actually older than Attack on Titan, but the Attack on Titan anime is definitely older than that, and
Yeah.
that's when Attack on Titan blew
Really
up in
blew
my
up.
mind, because
Very
I didn't
true.
I don't know what Attack on Titan was prior to that.
Yeah, that
So is
anime blew it up for real. You're right.
Yeah, so it's like I have a lot of influences, and then even Western influences in my writing and just a bunch of stuff. And so like
Okay.
I'm a big plot twist guy, so Westworld is a
Got
good
you.
series. Well, season 1 at least. And then some good TV shows, Fight Club, Mr. Robot. Yeah,
Okay.
well, movies actually. Mr. Robot is also a TV show, but it's like a bunch of I like really good plot twists and shows like that.
Okay.
And some anime have some of that too as well.
Okay. Um, moving on to the next questions. So, the founder of Saturday AM is Frederick L. Jones. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Do you mind if I ask how did you guys meet?
Just online. We met through
Okay.
another co-founder, Raymond, who connected us, and we discussed about helping launch Saturday AM in late 2013 and what the idea was was to help diversify even further, anime and manga with the people and characters and worlds and stories from around the world and not necessarily
Mm.
just from Japan. Making sure people see themselves in their heroes, that kind of stuff.
Okay. So, do you mind like going more in depth on what the process of, getting it started was? Like what kind of conversations did you have? Like what kind of connections did you have? Like if you don't mind, of
There were
course.
there were no real connections without going in too deep with it. There weren't no
Got
re-
you.
we weren't there were no deep connections, and we really started it from scratch with nothing. There is no like major funding. There's no We just started it, and thankfully in this digital age,
Mm.
you can make use of the internet, you can make use of how connected we are despite how far away we might be from one another. We're far away, but we're actually closer than we've ever been. And so we're all remote, starting from scratch, having a vision and putting it together, major influences, and seeing what places and companies like Shueisha for Shonen Jump, how they handle
Mm.
things, but then also wanting to do things our own way, wanting to do things the way we think is right, all right, spearheaded by Fred, but and also wanting to um, get influence also from the West, like a
Okay.
Marvel or Image Comics, and then have a nice blend. But a lot of the visual aesthetics will be influenced by, Shonen Jump and Japanese manga overall.
Got you. Okay. What was like can you explain to me the meaning behind the name like Saturday AM? Like what made you choose that name?
I think Fred came up with that, and
Okay.
that was to invoke the feeling of watching Saturday morning
Mm.
cartoons. And then at the time we had this little joke where it's like Saturday AM, but AM was like little tiny slang, or
Okay.
it meant like action manga.
Okay.
But
Okay.
it's really Saturday AM to invoke that feeling of Saturday morning cartoons. But then you're coming to the Saturday AM magazine, kind of like Shonen Jump, to get that not from anime or an actual animation, but from the
Mm.
comics. And you can even tell in the almost like our own kind of little tsunami.
Mm.
And when you open the magazine, even the table of contents, it's like with time. So it's like, oh, at 8 a.m. you'll read this. At 9 a.m. you'll
Yeah.
read this. Yeah. So yeah.
Okay. Should I assume like the same naming scheme went into like Saturday brunch and Saturday PM?
Exactly. So PM is more late night, and so the series are a little bit more mature, and then Saturday brunch is more female oriented, and there's more LGBT content in there, even though it's in all of it, but
Mm.
there's more of a focus in those magazines.
Okay. Okay. That's very. It makes sense, and I'm actually surprised I like didn't guess that when I was, trying to figure out what the naming sense was. But okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Um. Okay. How do you like what does somebody have to do to end up in the magazine?
So we're working on a very streamlined way to make it easy for people, but essentially we have manga, not necessarily a contest, but like an event,
Hmm.
a submission event every summer called Summer of Manga, and people can pitch their ideas to us, not just a pitch, like just a pitch, not like a 30 page, no comic pages, but just a
Hmm.
pitch and maybe a portfolio, who you are, what the story is about, synopsis, and we'll kind of dictate how you submit, and how you submit and the way you submit. If you go with the rules, is also an indicator of what kind of person you are. So we care about who you are, the person, and
Hmm.
then if you'd be a good fit for us, because you can always be published somewhere else. And then
Okay.
if the content is on brand with what we want to do.
Hmm.
So during those kind of events, and we just had one. In fact, the latest Saturday AM issue is a Summer of Manga issue, where the chosen entries were inside the issue, because you pitch to us, and then we pick the ones we like, and then we work with them. Our editor works with them to develop something, nothing crazy, like maybe 15 pages, 7 to 15
Hmm.
pages of their stuff, and then that gets digitally published in the digital magazine Saturday AM, right? And then the ones with the best experience, best fanfare, best process overall from start
Mm.
to finish, they usually get a spot in our Saturday annual book
Okay.
where they get to be traditionally published and paid for their work. But again, you can say you're traditionally published where your books are essentially worldwide, in some cases maybe even translated. So that's also
Mm.
cool. So we try to empower creators as best as we can and give them a shot for to make manga that honestly really you can't get anywhere else.
Okay.
So some of manga's the best way, I would say, but there are other ways where there are a few times where we would reach out, but that's very rare. And then
Okay.
there are other times where, as long as you're in our network and we find you, something may happen and we might reach out. It's fluid, but the best way is through Summer of Manga if you want to be a comic creator.
Okay.
And we're coming up with a streamlined way that it breaks it down, what to expect from us and what we expect from you, and what the process is to, what tiers of connection you would have with us, and all of that will be broken down and explained in the future on the website. But for now, as is the way most people know it, again, is just through Summer of Manga. At least that's the way to get in with us, and then from there,
Mm.
if it's a pleasant experience, pleasant partnership, it'll just continue to grow from there.
Okay. Um, kind of. You had mentioned like the editors part. How exactly do you select the editors then?
We already have editors, so you're talking about
Okay.
selecting for Summer of Manga.
Yes.
Oh, so
In the sense of
just
like, how do you, like, what is there like a certain, I guess, not qualification? I don't want to use that word in this scenario, but what are like some of those things like you would look for in a story, and then what do you use to like categorize it for like, is this AM, PM, brunch, kind of things like that?
first is if it's just interesting. There's
Okay.
a lot of us looking through the entries, because we got hundreds of entries, to hundreds, and so
Mm.
there's a lot of us looking through it. And if it's just interesting, if it's something we need, it doesn't even need to be perfect, but if it's something where, okay, we see how this could be great, um as long as it's not too, sometimes people would, one of our pitch things is to have an elevator mashup pitch, or
Okay.
essentially you're kind of telling us what it is with two other themes or series or whatever. So for example, Naruto would be Harry Potter meets ninjas, pretty much.
Okay.
And so we would look if you can break your series down like that, where we can just read just that line and kind of get a vibe of what's happening here. Now, but the issue is that sometimes some people come and say, "Oh, it's like Dragon Ball meets, you know, Naruto," when both series are already kind of alike
Mm.
in too many ways, where we don't think you're coming up with anything interesting here, or anything like it's not worth our
Okay.
time, right? Sometimes if you are just a single team, you're the artist, you're the illustrator, but your art is not there yet, that might be
Okay.
an issue. Or you just do, when we ask for a portfolio and your portfolio is mostly just illustrations, and you've never done comics, we might still reach out, because again, in part, this process is also to help develop people. We might still reach out, but those are the kind of things we look for, where if your portfolio is just illustrations, then there's a concern that maybe you don't know how to do sequential art, because sequential art is a whole different ballgame.
Okay.
And so there's a lot to factor in. If you say you're a writer but you've never written anything, like there's a lot to factor, because at that point you're not really a writer, you just have an idea.
Mm.
So there's a lot that goes into it, and then we just pick the best from there. From hundreds, we kind of narrow it down to, I think we did like about like maybe 8, but even next year we're looking to even bring it down even more. And so that's kind of, we just, as long as it's interesting, that's kind of what we go for, and that's what we pick. And then as for where it will fit, it's pretty self-explanatory where something would fit. We can look at something and go, this is a little bit more
Okay.
mainstream and it skews younger, so we'll go AM, right? It'll go AM if most of the Summer of Manga entries will go to the Summer of Manga AM issue regardless. But if they become something that becomes serialized, where they continue to be run in the magazine, right? Because they just do one shots, right?
Mm,
But if one of the one shots is something that we think would be a strong series, then we decide what issue it's going to be in, and then from the issue, and especially with our direction with the editor, we can also help push them in a certain direction. And it's like, oh, we think this is AM, so it'll be written for AM. If we think this is
okay.
PM, it'll be written for PM. And it's same for brunch. And
Okay.
so if it's more mature, it'll be probably PM. But again, if it has a lot more LGBTQ focus, or the main character is that, or the
Mm,
creator is that, whatever, it's fluid, but it's usually skews one more than the other. And whichever one it skews more towards is where
that's
it's
where we go.
most likely going to end up.
Okay. So on the topic of like the serialization process, um, how exactly, let me see how I want to word this. So let's say someone sends you in a series and you like it, and do you go from like, is it more of like a staff choice of like, hey, we should serialize this into a full series, or is it kind of like how Weekly Shonen Jump does, where like readers will vote on stuff like what they enjoy, and you
It's
get
a
like readers' opinion?
Yeah, it's a combination of both. We have
Okay.
surveys, and from the surveys, yeah, it's a mixture of both. So from the surveys and what we think. So
Okay.
it's a combination.
Makes sense. Okay. And most likely the last question. Okay, so, and this was more so a friend that had asked me this, so I'm kind of just asking you as well. Would you consider it more of like manga or comic books, or something entirely different?
What do you mean?
Okay, so I feel like in America, and this is just from the people that I've met, a lot of people have the stigma that it's not manga unless it's coming from Japan.
Yeah.
And so, how do I say this?
Well,
Would you,
are you asking? Do I consider say
yeah,
Apple Black more comic than manga?
yes.
I consider Apple Black both because it's literally both. And
Okay,
so it's manga is just a Japanese word for comics.
comics, very true.
And I understand that in the West, right, when somebody says manga for, lack of confusion,
Mm,
when you say manga, you're generally referring to Japanese comics, right?
true.
But technically, it's all manga, it's all comics, it's all manhwa, even if it's from Korea, like Korea, that's the Korean
Mm,
word. That's just a Korean word. It's not necessarily manhwa doesn't necessarily mean scrolling format comics. Those things are just unique to the country they're from and the production style of the sequential work. And so in Japan, they're more used to very quick stories, weekly, they work a lot.
mm,
So you're doing a lot. And so you can't color it all the time. So it's grayscale. They save money. It's conservative. And then there's a style to the storytelling where it's serialized and there's always like a cliffhanger that's the Japanese style.
mm.
But that's the Japanese style of making comics.
Comics,
The
very
word
true.
for comics for them is just manga. It'll just be confusing a little bit sometimes if you in certain scenarios, if you want to differentiate, and then it's much easier to just say manga than Japanese comics. So a lot of times some manga journalists,
Mm,
Japanese comic journalists, will just say manga for journalistic purposes to just make it
mm,
easy. Because immediately you say that, people know what you're talking about.
very true.
Technically, technically, even I have a video, clock striker video, because this issue came up again. And in the video, there was a Debayoki who is, I believe, Japanese, or at least half Japanese, and
Mm,
she's a manga journalist, and she mentions it as well, and she says that when writing articles and stuff like that, I say manga to differentiate, but at the bottom, like even when you go to Japan, section, all of that, it's just comics.
very true.
When you ask people, you show them the Spider-Man comic from the West, the flippy
Yeah.
issue. They call it manga. They don't say, "Oh, this is comics and this is manga." They just call it manga. So when you ask me that question, it's like Apple Black is a comic, but Apple Black is a manga, and Apple Black is a manhwa, and Apple Black is a manhwa, and
Very
Apple
true.
Black is a
Okay.
BD, and Apple Black it's all of them.
Okay.
And end of the day, I don't really care what somebody calls it, as long as you call it interesting. I'm good, right?
I can respect that.
But ultimately, it's manga. Japanese people call it manga, and I'm talking about Apple Black specifically. It's been called
Okay.
manga by Japanese people. It's been called manga by other manga artists. It's been called manga by French manga artists. It's been called manga by us. It's been called manga by the manga journalists. It's been called manga by Japanese CEOs, publishing CEOs that are partners of ours. Is manga. The comics, yes, as well. It's also comics. You know what I mean? So it's one of those weird things. It's like, what's the point of this argument? Usually, when people bring this up, like, you know who doesn't have an issue with this? The
Very
Japanese.
true.
It's always like Americans that want to be like, actually, you know what I mean? They just, or they're trying to delegitimize, or they're trying to troll if we're keeping it a stack. So
Also true.
it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Manga comics are the same thing. There are differences, obviously, in the words. There are differences in the tradition of how it's put together. But it's kind of like me calling my grandma abuela, even though I'm not Spanish.
Yes. Okay.
Or it's kind of like soccer and football. It's the same sport, but the way soccer is handled in the U.S. is different from the way it's handled in England. It's like you can get relegated in England, but here you have playoffs.
Okay. Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I respect
Oh
that
yeah,
answer.
yeah.
I definitely respect that answer. And it's honestly the same way with like the word anime. Anime is just short for
Same thing.
animation. It's the
Much
exact
same
same thing. But like
Yeah,
yeah, in Japan they'll say like even Shrek and SpongeBob are considered anime. So I
exactly.
definitely see what you mean, and I actually do agree with you on that topic. But that's the last question. Is there anything you want to say really quickly?
I hope you enjoyed Apple Black. I hope you enjoyed all the other series. I'm not sure which ones you read, but I hope you enjoyed whatever you read, and I appreciate this interview. I hope
Yes,
other people
sir.
check it out as well.
Thank you for this opportunity, taking the time out your schedule for this interview. I really do appreciate it.
Problem.
Thank you everybody for watching. I hope you all really enjoyed the video. Once again, comment down, have you read any Saturday AM manga? Which ones have you read? What's your favorite? We have the creator of Apple Black right here. I could vouch that it's a really good series. Volume 4 comes out early November, I believe it was.
Yeah,
Really
November
good.
8th.
Check it out. It's great. You won't waste your time. It's amazing. But that's it for me. This is Simon Sabro signing out. I'll catch you on the next one.